Hey, in today's video, I'm going to be explaining every Tier 1 suit in the Fisk Superheroes mod in a lot of detail. A lot of detail. Starting, firstly, with Captain Cold. Captain Cold is Tier 1, obviously, so he has a 75% damage reduction by default, but this can be changed with the /Fiskheroes rules damage reduction baseline command. Hang on. Those rules set damage reduction baseline, which can be set to anything. 1%, 100%, anything. But by default, it is 75%. This applies to all Tier 1 suits, and so I will only be covering it with the Captain Cold suit. He deals 4 punch damage and 2 weapon damage and jumps half a block higher. So it cannot jump up 2 blocks, but it can jump up a block and a slab. He has 3 fall resistance, so he is able to fall an extra 3 blocks before he starts taking fall damage. So, by default, you can fall 5 blocks before you start to take fall damage. Some details with the skin are that the coat applies to both the chest, the legs, and the head, allowing it to be applied even when only wearing the jacket. Meanwhile, the rest can be applied without having the coat on. However, you can see the details that are underneath the coat, such as the goggle strap going all the way around the head, or this little light on the leg, which gets partially covered when wearing the suit. Additionally, he has cold resistance, which allows him to take 50% damage, which allows him to resist 50% of damage from all cold-based attacks, which there is 3 suits that deal cold damage in the mod. Those being Killer Frost, Captain Cold, and Batman. Take 1 damage, and the punch, take 4. The blade, you take 5. Okay, so then 4, 8, and you're definitely gonna die from this. Let me heal you first. Okay, and 10. Does 7. And now, and this left you on 4. So 3, and the grenade, 4, at the briefly 5. Alright. 7. That is good. Okay, and then the grenade. I should probably heal you first, actually. 9. Yeah, that's the cold resist. It's very good. Next up for Captain Cold are the augments. These are all the augment tokens, those being iron, gold, gold titanium, vibranium, and dwarf star. They're crafted like this. The augments that Captain Cold has access to are damage reduction, punch damage, weapon damage, jump height, fall resistance, and sprint speed. For damage reduction, the first level, he gains 2.273% damage reduction, putting him at 77.273% damage reduction, letting him take 2% more damage. And then he gets 1 extra fall resistance, which allows him to fall 9 blocks instead of only 8 before taking fall damage. Under gold titanium, he has access to all of his augments. For damage reduction, it increases it to 4.167%, allowing him 79.167% damage reduction. For punch damage, it increases by 1, allowing for 5 punch damage. For weapon damage, it increases by 0.5, dealing 2.5 damage with weapons. Jump height increases by 0.5 for 1 block of jump height, so he is now able to jump up 2 whole blocks. Fall resistance yet again increases by 1, allowing him to fall 10 blocks before taking damage. And sprint speed increases by 10%, allowing him to sprint 10% faster. And the gold titanium is much of the same, with damage reduction increasing to a 5.769% damage reduction, allowing for 80.769% damage to be reduced by default. And as is the same as before, these all increase by the same amounts. So, he gains an additional weapon punch damage, allowing for 6 damage, an additional 0.5 weapon damage for 3 damage, an additional 0.5 blocks, allowing him to jump up 2 blocks in a slab, additional fall resistance, allowing him to fall 11 blocks, an additional sprint speed, allowing him to sprint 20% faster. For Vibranium, he has all but weapon damage, jump height, and sprint speed, as those have now been maxed out and are unable to be augmented any further. For damage reduction, he maxes that out at 7.143%, allowing him to take 82% less damage. He gains 1 more punch damage for 7 punch damage, and an additional fall resistance for 7, allowing him to fall up to 12 blocks before beginning to take fall damage. And for the suit-specific item, he has his signature cold gun. You aim this gun by holding left click, and it has 2 modes if you crouch. The first is the cold beam, which it is selected by default, which, when aiming, if you click, it allows you to fire up to 32 blocks away. And wherever it lands, wherever the cold beam hits, it lays ice. And if it hits a player, it adds the freeze effect, which is not a potion effect. It is an effect added overlaying your damage reduction bar, which reduces regeneration, making players heal less than they were before, which is very effective against people with high regeneration, such as speedsters, or the spiders, or a bunch of other suits like Deadpool and all them. Next up, with the cold gun, is the cryo grenade. This, just like before, you aim with left click, but instead of firing a constant beam when you right click, it instead shoots out a grenade, which lays a area of ice, and causing a lot of knockback on the player when it hits, causing them to potentially go flying and take massive fall damage, if the suit they're wearing allows for it. And that is all there is to show with Captain Cold. Next up is Rip Hunter. He has an extra alt, the Time Master alt, which removes the trench coat. Other than that, it is the exact same as the normal Rip Hunter suit. So, if I were to take away the trench coat and the jacket from these two, they are the exact same textures. Additionally, with the Time Master alt, you can actually see Rip Hunter's gun on his hip, which if I draw it, you can see vanishes. And you can see vanishes from the player's model and instead is in my hand. Additionally, this suit, like Cold, has the jacket able to appear on both the chest, but also the legs and the head, as the jacket's... As the collar of the jacket is able to appear on the back of the player's head, obstructing their outer layer. And the coat's base appears on the player's leg, both slightly on the inside, but mostly on the outside, showing up on both the front and the sides. When wearing the full suit, you get 5 punch damage, 2.5 weapon damage, 0.5 jump height, 3.5 fall resistance, and 10% sprint speed, allowing you to fall 8.5 blocks. You're able to jump up a block and a half, and you obviously resist 75% damage. The suit has no power file, so you have no resistance. You have no specific resistances or strengths. Instead, what you have is Rip Hunter's gun. The gun is able to deal 6 damage a shot and fires every roughly half a second. So it is able to deal around 12 damage a second, with 0 inaccuracy with each shot, causing it to fire in a straight line every time. The Time Master ult also acts the exact same way, with the gun acting the same, with shooting every 0.5 seconds and dealing 6 damage a shot, with the exact same stats as well, as the ult has nothing special about it. For Rip Hunter's augments, he has damage reduction, punch damage, weapon damage, jump height, fall resistance, and sprint speed, the same as Captain Cold. However, he does not augment them the same amount as Captain Cold. Firstly, with Iron Upgrade, he gets 1 extra fall resistance, allowing him to fall 9.5 blocks before taking damage. Gains an additional 0.5 weapon damage, 1 extra punch damage for 6, and again gains 2.273% damage reduction, putting him at 77.273%. For the gold upgrade, he gets 4.167%, allowing him to take 79% damage, 1 punch damage for 7, 0.5 weapon damage again for 3.5, 0.5 jump height for 1, allowing him to jump up 2 blocks, 1 fall resistance, 2 fall resistance, allowing him to fall 10.5 blocks before taking fall damage, and 10% sprint speed, allowing him to sprint 20% faster. Gold Titanium, he gets a 5.769% damage reduction, putting him at 80.769%. 3 punch damage, which is his max, putting him at 8 punch damage. 0.5 weapon damage, putting him at 1.5 for 4. 1 jump height for 1.5 blocks, which is a total of 2.5. 3 fall resistance for 6.5, which is then 11.5 blocks, and another 10% sprint speed, putting him at 30%. For Vibranium, the same is true again, except that punch damage is maxed out, so you can no longer augment that. So, for damage reduction, it maxes out at 7.143% at 82.143%. Weapon damage, it gets an extra 0.5 for 2, for a total of 4.5 weapon damage. Gained an additional 0.5 jump height for 1.5, for a total of 3 blocks of jump height. For fall resistance, he gets an extra 1 for 7.5, which totals to 12.5 blocks of falling. And for sprint speed, he gets an additional 30%, which makes it max out at 40%, allowing him to sprint 40% faster than any other player. Additionally, the Time Master alt in an iterator does not require an achievement and can instead be unlocked at any time with or without an achievement, letting you change it at any time so long as you have an iterator. And lastly, for Tier 1, is Spodermen. This is a secret suit, only unlockable through Batfish. You have to complete that, which you can use to Batfish through a Game Boy cartridge and a Game Boy. You simply craft the two together, and then it inserts the cartridge, and you can simply right-click this to begin it. With that intro. And if you shift escape, it automatically closes it. In the case where you accidentally open it without being able to press is to close it. Additionally, no one can see the game except for you, causing it to not be visible outside of first person. The Spodermen suit is The Spodermen suit is again Tier 1 with 3 punch damage, 4 jump height, 12 fall resistance, and 75 sprint speed, which makes it a relatively fast suit with some decent jump height. But its melee damage is lackluster. And when you press ability 1, he says this.
LOM Spodermen.
Which has no cooldown and can instead be spammed.
LOM Spodermen.
However, you might have noticed with that, its tone changes, its pitch changes every time you press it.
LOM Spodermen.
So that pitch, and then...
LOM Spodermen.
So it is very noticeable and not very hard to spot how loud it gets, making it able to be pretty annoying. Great for just messing with your friends and bothering them. Additionally, the suit, as you can probably guess, is very not detailed, as it's meant for a joke for anyone who actually spends the time to get, I believe, 10,000 points in Batfish. I may be wrong with that number. So, it is a very difficult suit to unlock, and it is very not strong when you first get it. However, where it excels is when you augment it, as all of the stats that you augment do not actually have any limit until you get to Dwarf Star, and can instead augment all the stats to max. So, as always, we start with damage reduction, which 2.273, punch damage, which puts up to 4, weapon damage, which he doesn't normally have, but gets added on thanks to the augments at 0.5, an extra 0.5 jump height, allowing him to jump up 5.5 blocks, 1 fall resistance, and 10% sprint speed. I'm sure you can probably assume that the sprint speed gets very high. Again, we do the same. 79.167% damage reduction, 5 punch damage, 1 weapon damage, 1 jump height, which totals out to 5, which is actually 6 blocks, 14 fall resistance for 19 blocks before fall damage, 95 sprint speed, 5.769% damage reduction for 80.769, 3 punch damage for 6, 1.5 weapon damage for 1.5, 1.5 jump height for 5.5, which is actually 6.5 blocks, 3 fall resistance for 15, which is actually 20 blocks, 30% sprint speed, which is 105%, 7.143% damage reduction, which is 82.143%, which, you may remember, is where all of the other Tier 1 suits left off. But it's not actually max. Punch damage then increases to 7 with 4. Weapon damage to 2. Jump height to 7 blocks total. Fall resistance to 21. Sprint speed to 115%. And lastly, 8.333% damage reduction for 83.333. 5 punch damage for 8. 2.5 weapon damage for 2.5. 6.5 jump height for 7.5 blocks. 5 fall resistance for 22 blocks before damage. And 50% sprint speed before, or 125% sprint speed. Which makes him one of the fastest suits in the mod that is not a speedster. At least on foot. Obviously, when you have things like flying, it gets outclassed pretty fast. Additionally, he jumps very high. Which allows me to get up on this tree, for example, and if I was near lower buildings, go potentially higher. Which makes him one of the most mobile suits on foot, but obviously not very practical in combat. But don't underestimate him. 8 punch damage is still very high. That's a 3-shot for normal players. And that is all of the Tier 1 suits. So next video will probably be the Tier 2s, and then 3s, and so on until we reach Tier 10 and series ends.